Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today we are going to be talking about that very pesky far-right call for a national inquiry into the grooming gangs, as Sir Keir Starmer once said in one of his speeches about the completely evil issue. Anyway, I've covered that in a previous video, but it didn't take long after that for a backbench Labour MP to actually break ranks after having to vote down an amendment which, to be fair, would have killed the schools bill, but either way, vote down an amendment that would have meant that there would be a need for the government to partake in a national government-led inquiry. Dan Carden has become the first Labour MP to break ranks and demand a national inquiry into the grooming gangs, obviously making him far right. The MP for Liverpool Walton said that the public call for justice must be heeded and that Sir Keir Starmer should use the full power of the state to deliver justice. It comes as new polling shows that more than 4 in 10 people believe that the grooming gang scandal was a deliberate cover-up. The PM ordered Labour MPs to vote to block a statutory inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, which was backed by Kemi Badenoch and Elon Musk. And as I've gone through, it was a win-win for the Tories, because either they actually win that vote and there's no national inquiry and instead the bill is killed, which actually rolls back an awful lot of good that the Tories did, so I don't really blame them for this move, or they can use the attack line, Labour don't care about groomed kids. Anyway, naturally, Labour have tried to skillfully quash these accusations of not wanting a national inquiry. So according to the BBC, the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has announced plans for a nationwide review of grooming gang evidence and 5 government-backed local inquiries. So yes, I want to make that very clear. It is a nationwide review of grooming gang evidence. That is not a national inquiry, I would add, because instead there are going to be 5 government-backed local inquiries, meaning that these are effectively taxpayer-funded local inquiries, which is fine, but the thing is that we know that, there's been stories that there are 50 towns with this problem. This is why there needs to be a nationwide inquiry into this, because there might be ones that we simply haven't heard of as well. And not only that, but this is an inquiry into only a fifth of the towns having this issue, so frankly this just isn't good enough, but obviously people are saying this is a U-turn, which it isn't. It's just supporting more local inquiries that these local governments want anyway. She stopped short of launching a statutory national inquiry, as called for by the Conservatives and some Labour MPs, but this marks a clear shift in the government's position. Cooper said top lawyer Tom Crowther, who led the inquiry in Telford, would help Oldham and 4 other pilot areas yet to be named to develop their own reviews. As I say, this is better than nothing, but as we go into detail you'll see that actually it is pretty much nothing. She also announced a rapid 3-month national audit headed by veteran government troubleshooter Baroness Louise Casey to examine the demographics of the gangs and their victims, as well as cultural drivers behind the offending. And the Conservatives said that this is wholly inadequate, and I could go through the rest of the article with all these comments, but you pretty much know what everyone's going to say. I'm here for the details, and luckily the government released details of what these inquiries might look like. So according to the government website, victims will be given more power to have their cases re-examined. The Home Secretary has announced today that as she unveils a £10 million action plan to tackle grooming gangs and child sex abuse. Now we'll get back into the cost of this and how it compares to other things later, because Rupert Lowe did his classic numbers game on this, so we'll definitely go into that. But anyway, as part of this government's mission to halve violence against women and girls instead of eradicating it for some reason, deliver justice for victims and ensure more perpetrators of this crime end up behind bars, today's Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has set out new measures to finally deliver change and action for survivors of grooming gang crimes to get justice. Survivors and victims will be able to ask for their closed cases to be reviewed by an independent criminal justice review panel where their previous investigations were not taken forward to prosecution by the police or CPS. Fair enough. The Home Secretary is writing to the National Police Chiefs Council requesting officers look again at these unsolved and closed grooming gang cases backed by £2.5 million in funding for stronger investigations. Again, it doesn't sound too bad until you realise that overall the Telford inquiry cost nearly £2.5 million, I think it was just under it, but an awful lot of money, and that covered what? I think it took 3 years to do that. I think some people say 7, I can't remember. Either way, these things are kind of the mere basics that you would expect from anyone who cares about this issue at all. Reopening cases and reviewing them is kind of the bare minimum of what we need. This is why we want a national-led inquiry. Because fact of the matter is, if you're only doing this at the local level, which some inquiries have already done, we found that, well, we find that this actually goes up further and that needs some review at first, but even then, they don't do the reviews properly. The people in charge aren't reviewed properly. The people down below, you know, the police officers who ignored these crimes, frankly, they don't actually get any punishment from these reviews. And there seems to be no effort from Labour to actually delve justice for this crime. Since taking office, the government has been engaging with victims to implement the recommendation of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, which again, I think that was the J report, and I went through that in another video. And that is effectively just recommendations for general child sexual exploitation, rather than this specific issue of grooming gangs, which again, nearly half of people think was covered up. And pretty much everyone agrees was one of the worst crimes that possibly could happen in Britain. You know, industrial scale, well, not kidnapping, but rape and drugging, and in some case murder, and in pretty much all cases violent abuse as well as sexual abuse of young girls throughout England, and a bit in Scotland as well. This work provides further momentum to deliver change for victims. Today, the Home Secretary has pledged that by Easter 2025 the government will lay out a clear timetable for taking forward the recommendations of the final IICSA report. What I do find funny about this is that they've actually taken Kemi Badenoch's advice on board, and they found that they can actually implement recommendations from old reports and have new reports made at the same time. Anyway, it goes on to say, we will also be providing a new national backing for locally led inquiries backed by £5 million of funding. Okay, this is specifically the locally led inquiries, and £5 million of funding for, again, 5 local inquiries. That's about £1 million each. God knows how many years it's going to take. Again, it cost Telford over £2 million for, God, however long that inquiry was. If this is £5 million a year for them, it probably won't be too bad. But, yeah, again, at this rate, why not just have a national inquiry? Working with partnership with Tom Crowther Casey, the chair of the impactful Telford Inquiry into Grooming Gangs, the Home Office will develop a new effective framework for victim-centred locally led inquiries and work with Oldham Council and 4 other pilot areas to implement it. Right, so this is their idea. They're having pilot areas to then expand it to presumably the 45 other towns that were affected by this issue. It will also develop a new way for councils to work locally with victims. Further work is underway as part of the forthcoming Hillsborough Law and the duty of candour to boost the accountability mechanisms that support and follow up on local inquiries, ensuring public servants that fail victims are properly held to account. The thing I find mad about all this, actually, is that if it's being put forward by the Telford Inquiry leader, this Tom Crowther gentleman, why do you need pilot schemes? How is Telford not the pilot scheme? Why can't you just do this Telford inquiry with the 49 other towns that had a grooming gang problem? Why do you need to have another pilot programme? That doesn't make sense to me. You've had the pilot programme. You're literally putting the person in charge who ran the pilot programme in Telford. Anyway, they go on to say that the Home Secretary has also unveiled a rapid national audit to uncover the scale and profile of group-based offending in the UK today, including ethnicity. Again, that's good to hear, at least. On a scale of 1 to 10, this is probably a 4. There is good stuff in here, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be. Anyway, the best person in Britain for going over grooming gangs at the moment, Charlie Peters, was absolutely on this case. Yvette Cooper announces additional £10 million funding package to tackle grooming gangs as Labour U-turn amid outrage. And we've gone through the details here, but Charlie has his own analysis that I think we should go through. So after going through the details we've just been through, Peters has another tweet. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phillips said the government's announcement of just 5 local rape gang inquiries is totally inadequate because up to 50 towns are affected, so what about the rest? Don't they matter? And it appears these local inquiries won't have the legal powers under the Inquiry Act 2005 to compel witnesses to attend, take evidence under oath, and requisition written evidence. Lack of these powers is why the chairs of Manchester inquiries are reported to have resigned last year. Victims, the public, and even the Labour Mayor Andy Burnham want full national public inquiries with the powers needed to compel evidence. So do I. Yes, and that is another good point. Andy Burnham, Manchester Mayor, who is very popular with the Mancunians, probably for reasons like this, did actually break ranks in Labour and say, obviously we need more powers for these inquiry, and we obviously need a national one. So good on Andy Burnham for that. But this is how weak Starmer's getting. We're not even a year in to this government, and people are already breaking ranks quite openly. Again, the honeymoon period of a new government, typically, it's supposed to last, months, if not years in some cases. And when it comes to Keir Starmer, his honeymoon period was over within a month, and at this point, this type of stuff was happening to the Tories, post-Brexit, really. You didn't see too much rising up of the ranks under David Cameron. Obviously, he had half the membership leaving after the gay marriage thing. But this is a problem we have in the UK at the moment. The two main parties are so weak at the moment that basically they have absolutely no control over their own MPs. I mean, this isn't the first time there has been an uprising of MPs against Keir Starmer. It seems to be happening every month. Peters goes on to report that Cooper rises again and says the IICSA ran for 7 years and took evidence from 7,000 victims and survivors, and too many of those voices and the bravery they showed have been ignored. But how many of them were survivors of the grooming gang scandal? IICSA decided to hear zero evidence from survivors or those with expert knowledge of the crime pattern. Yeah, so this is what I mean. The IICSA was a report into general child sexual exploitation or abuse, rather than specifically into grooming gangs, and as Charlie Peters said, it heard zero evidence from survivors of those grooming gangs, so how's it going to be adequate for them? Striking intervention from Labour's Rotherham MP Sarah Champion, who asks if the local reviews will have statutory footing. She notes that the big effort is being to make sure that there has been no cover-ups, and Cooper said she will look into the accountability framework. Again, even Labour MPs are going onto the far-right side of this argument, saying this national inquiry, well, one, why isn't there a national inquiry? But two, the inquiries we do have, why are they clearly not good enough? It just looks like that they are hiding something. And a lot of these new Labour MPs, they're not senior in the party or anything like that. A lot of them will have just been selected because, the local Labour branch will have liked them. And these people, some of them will be towing party line like nothing else. Others, though, will be like this, where they think, well, I don't think the Labour Party is quite right on this, and it's probably why they were voted in fact, by their local branch. And obviously, it's not taken them long to realise that with this government they're quite weak, and so they can be open about their dissent. It's quite good to see, I'll be honest with you. Anyway, Rupert Lowe does his classic big tweet about the maths of this whole issue. Let's be clear on what happened yesterday. Labour announced a £10 million package to investigate the rape gangs. Well, specifically it was to give victims support and review their cases, but I guess investigate the rape gangs. It's kind of a Venn diagram there, yeah. It kind of is to investigate the rape gangs. It's pathetic and it's insulting. Why have they done this? Politics. Labour know their position couldn't work, so they had to give just enough to look like they were doing something. It means nothing and nothing has changed. Don't fall for it. I'm pretty much on this train, to be honest with you. 10 million, let's make some comparisons. The foreign aid budget for 2023 to 24 was £41.54 million, and this year it's gone up to £133 million. Yes, that is just nuts. £500 million has been handed to foreign farmers in aid. £8 million a day is spent on housing illegal migrants in hotels. That's £8 million a day. £10 million to help bring justice for thousands of raped and abused girls is basically nothing. Yep, incentives are all skew whiff, and we have literally one of the worst governments that we could have asked for in this time of need. This inquiry is set to take place in just 5 areas. Again, Rupert Lowe has actually confused the 10 million with the 5 million. The 10 million is going towards reviewing the cases. The rape gang inquiries are actually only getting 5 million, so imagine the type of things he'd be typing if he found that out. It's estimated that these gangs have been operating in 50 towns and cities, likely more. I'll say it again, there needs to be a full, free and fair national inquiry, and we need data. I asked in Parliament yesterday again on court transcripts, deportations, nationality breakdown, re-offences, releases and more. How many answers? Zero. To be fair, yet again, Yvette Cooper has said that part of this 10 million will be going into reviewing the data to actually hopefully give us accurate and decent data on, well, we definitely know that we are getting nationality breakdowns, whether it's re-offences or deportations. We don't know, but probably not. It's a cover-up, it has been for decades, and it continues even now. Yes, and I wouldn't be shocked if Reform were in charge that we'd actually be getting something decent on this front. They clearly care very deeply about it and have done for years. Whereas when it comes to Labour diehard politicians answering questions on grooming gangs, well, let's hear what Sadiq Khan would have to say about it.
I asked you this question last week and you found every which way but not to answer it. Just how many grooming gangs have we got in London?
To avoid any misunderstanding, can she define what she means by that?
Absolutely stupendous start from Sadiq Khan right here, playing the old classic hatchling game of what's a grooming gang? I don't know what you mean by grooming gang. It's a stupid tactic because effectively the easiest way to answer it will involve in some way the term Pakistani, And Sadiq Khan will then use the race card to say, I don't need to answer that.
Yes, if you look at what's gone on in Rotherham, where there are people taking young girls, grooming them for sex, that is what I'm talking about.
We know in London there are issues about exploitation of young people, but they're not as defined by the member in her definition of what those types of gangs are.
I mean, that is just a roundabout way of saying no. But I mean, as I say, stupendous start asking for the definition, and the basic definition was just gangs of people who groom girls to effectively be sex slaves. So according to London Mayor, that doesn't happen in London, okay? Well, there were follow-up questions, luckily.
So are you saying we haven't got the same sort of gangs that are in Rotherham, Bradford and lots of other places in the country?
Just for what's misunderstanding, what does she mean by that?
You know full well what I mean by that.
Yeah, just a great answer yet again, because he's effectively trying to guide her in to, as I say, use the term Pakistani, or at least ethnic minority or something like that, so that he can then just accuse her of racism and be able to dodge the question. But she's smarter than that for once, and this, I believe, Tory of the member of the London Assembly is doing a good job of pressuring him. Are there grooming gangs in London? What do you mean by that? You know what I mean by that. Stop being stupid.
It's all over the television. You know exactly what I mean by that. These gangs of people that are grooming young girls for sex. Do we actually have those in London?
Today, I'm unclear, Chair, what is meant by the question. If you could spell it out, I can answer.
I've just spelt it out. Are you not listening? It's the sort of gangs that groom young girls at a young age for sex. Exactly how much clearer do you want me to be?
Yeah, it's made clear at the end there. Oh, she needs to spell it out for me. Can you spell it out? Can you use the term Pakistani so that I have a get-out-of-jail-free card? And effectively, in a very polite way, this woman of the London Assembly is saying, put the race card back in the deck. Again, it's smart. It's what righties need to know. Is this the type of person to play the race card? If it is, just don't bring up race. Just bring up the issue. Because you don't need to say the ethnicity part to make your point. It doesn't need to be said. And if you don't say it, it makes people like Sadiq Khan look even worse. So as I say, well done to that member of the London Assembly. In fact, just to make it clear, I keep saying this member, it's Susan Hall who went forward to be Mayor of London for the Tories in the last mayoral election. And obviously she's done good here, and she would have been my choice for London Mayor at the time. And the fact that she's still in the London Assembly and putting pressure on Sadiq Khan like this, it's very good to see. I don't know if she'll be put forward for Tories next time, but, you know, if I were in London, I would consider voting for her. Well, that entirely depends on who Reform put forward, actually. But either way, you get the idea. This is how Labour want to respond. They don't want to do anything. But there's way too much pressure in Parliament now, because Tories are actually getting on board with it, even though they didn't do anything for 14 years. And you've got 5 Reform MPs who are just outclassing every single Tory MP that we have, even the ones we've had for the last 14 years. Great to see, as I say. Anyway, I think I've covered everything I need to for today. Labour haven't U-turned really at all. There's no national inquiry going on. They are just throwing out scraps for the people on the right to try and say, look, we're doing something about grooming gangs. And as it turns out, they're doing a pilot scheme for a pilot scheme that's already existed. They're throwing out pittance of public money. They could put way more than 10 million towards this and 5 million towards the inquiries, but they're not. And some people are suspecting that is because this government wants to still cover it up. But, well, we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, as I say, I think that's everything for today. So, shill time. It's Laughing at the Guardian with some Warming tomorrow. We have Punished Albert, we also have Tharium, and we have Cero on tomorrow, so it should be a fun one. Next Tuesday, it is Tosh Talks, and from the looks of it, we are going to be talking about the Lotus Eaters again. At least that's what the poll is saying so far. If you want to be involved in this poll, please do go over to join the Worcester Club. The link is down below. And there have even been people from the community who have come on streams as well, and we all have a good old time talking about topics of the day. So, you know, do come along. It's a good community, and I'm very active in that Discord. But if you want to help this channel directly, the freest and easiest way is to obviously subscribe, leave a comment, like, all that good stuff. If you want to help a bit more directly, membership is from £2 a day. You get access to all my old Laughing at the Guardian streams because they're quite spicy, and you also get your name down in the description. You can also send super chats and super thanks if you just want to give me a one-off donation. It really helps the channel keep going. I can't tell you how thankful I am to all the members I have. Anyway, as I said, with that, that is everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.